6 o'clock, if you would join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. Figured I wouldn't let you stop there. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Roll call, please, Connie.
Chris Mikowski. Here. Terry Lautner.
Here.
Deb Allen. Here. Jeff Shaw.
Here.
Jim O'Rourke.
Here.
Dave Darga.
Here.
Connie Preston here.
Thank you. Item 4, declaration of conflict of interest. If any board member has any conflict with any agenda item this evening, if you would declare it at this time. Okay, seeing none, I would like to move on to public comment. It is 6:01. I would like to open public comment. Seeing none, I'd like to close public comment. Still 6:01. Moving on to the consent calendar. The purpose of the consent calendar is to expedite business by grouping non-controversial items together to be dealt with in one board motion without discussion. Any member of the public, board, or staff may ask that any item of the consent calendar be removed and placed elsewhere on the agenda for full discussion. This evening, we have department reports from Treasury, Planning and Zoning, Fire. We have a Harbor Master's report. We have committee reports, Parks and Rec 8/3/22 meeting, and minutes from our 8/8/22 meeting, as well as post-audit invoices dated 8/3/22 through 9/8/22, and the authorization to sign the L4029 2022 tax rate request. Any member of the public that would like anything removed and placed elsewhere? Any member of staff? Or any board member? All right, seeing none, I'd look for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda or consent calendar as presented.
Support.
We have a motion and support. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Agenda approval. Any modifications to our agenda this evening? Anybody? Okay, look for a motion.
Move to approve the agenda as presented.
Support.
We have a motion and support. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Reports, you have my supervisor's report in front of you. Any questions about that? Okay. Trustees' remarks. Any trustees?
Just thanks to Fire Department for Memorial or Labor Day working on the cutting up the cars and stuff, and out to Jeff April's. And I was really surprised. I picked up that extrication tool, and I used to run the hydraulic ones. This new one is a lot heavier. It almost takes 2 people to pick it up. So they were doing good, getting down underneath the cars and stuff, and doing some real good training. So I thought it was good.
And thanks to the fire department, night before last, they had a boat fire down at Harbor West, which everybody was singing their praises on the dock while they were there. So appreciate that.
If I may, I'd also like to just say a special thank you to Sarah Claren and you, Jeff, for attending the Parks and Rec Committee meeting. I think that open discussion was great with the storyboards and the different information that we had, even though it wasn't exceedingly well attended. I think that the feedback was excellent. So thank you to you both for spending the time to be there.
Anything else? Thank you. Engineers report. Ken, you got anything or just the agenda items? All right, we'll see you then. Other officer remarks, Chief or Pete? Chief, come on up.
I didn't put it in my my report, but beginning of October, first week in October, Fire Prevention Week, and that the Saturday that during Fire Prevention Week. I was looking at the date, but we'll be having an open house at the station. And then referencing that boat fire, it's not in this month's report, but since you brought it up, I also wanted to thank Traverse City for coming over and helping us out with that. And Sutton's Bay actually had a crew in the area, so they stopped by and gave us a hand as well on that. So thanks to them. That's it, unless you guys have any questions for me.
Questions for the Chief? Thank you, Chief. Pete, did you have anything for us or?
No, I'm all set.
Agenda item? Okay. Communications from the clerk.
You noticed in your packet, I put in just the details on some new ambulances. That was just kind of for information, see what, they did bring that back to us like we asked. So in a future meeting, we'll still have to talk about, and I think once we have our Parks and Rec survey, talk about the ARPA funds in more detail.
Anybody have questions for Connie? Okay. Moving on to item 9, old business. There is none. New business, 10A. Pete, did you bring that piece of chain?
I did.
Bring it on up.
Okay, so in 2000, I think it was 9, we expanded our mooring field to the outside the walls at the harbor, outside the rock pile. So there's a lot more weather out there, and these are deep moorings. They're fixed. They're anchored into the bottom. Our anchors are good. I had a boater leave buoy 10 last month, and I asked the diver to go down and inspect, and he did, and then I had him pull the chain. And this is what it's like under the water right now. The shackle. Shackles they're worn. I'd use it around the house, not on a mooring anymore. But the chain itself, if you can see, is really thinned out. And, you know, this is just one sample of the 11 out there. So what I've done is I've gotten bids on chain and then using our diver at $125 per unit to replace all the chains, all the shackle, all the hardware down to the mooring on the floor of the bay. So he's ready to go if you approve tonight. And then what I'll do is at the end of the season, because I can't have him in the water too early in the spring because it's too cold. So I'd like to get it wrapped up before we close this year. And then I've got slips emptying out, and I'll probably put those remaining 10, actually I think there's 9 now. We'll put them in a slip for the rest of the season and let Tom get those chains and moorings replaced.
So each of their bids are just for materials?
The
and then-
materials only, and then
and then
Tom, all of them include Tom's labor. Yeah.
All of them would have Tom's labor in addition?
Yeah, no, total, that's all, those are all totals.
Oh, so, okay.
Yeah,
So-
Tom
so-
has his own hardware and tackle and
Okay.
stuff, he buys his chain in bulk.
So each of them does include the $13.75? For
Yes.
installation? Okay,
Yep,
great.
So 3/8, that's what you want is 3/8, not
Yeah.
any bigger?
yeah, because otherwise it gets too heavy, and we've got some that are in 40 feet of water, so then it pulls the
Quite
ball
heavy.
underwater, so,
Galvanized, okay.
yeah.
Well, I think I should make a motion that we award it to Tom Donnelly in the amount of $3,213.75.
Support. We have a motion and support. Further discussion? Tom's great. He does so much for us down there. He's a great guy. So, any other discussion?
That was just my question was, what's the deepest? You said about 40 feet.
Yeah, actually, I think one's 52. Yeah,
Okay.
it's pretty deep, yeah. So, we actually put floats on that one, midway, to help it stay up, yeah.
Any other discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, Pete. Timberlea Water Engineering Proposal / funding.
I mean, wow.
All right, so we've been looking at Timberlea for a while and just trying to keep the process moving forward. Asked Jeff, should we just submit a design proposal and get this moving? So we've tried to put it together with going forward with, like we discussed before, with replacing the tank, the big hydrodynamic tank in its place with a like tank of the proper pressure rating, and then also doing improvements to the Cottonwood booster station. You know, I'd been in the Cottonwood booster station, and there's concerns on the pumps and the tanks in there. Both are drastically oversized. But getting into the details of how big a tank should be in there, you know, it needs design, it needs to be worked through, and make sure we're not undersizing it so we can still flush the lines out, but not so oversized that we're only using 2% of the tank like we are now. So the proposal I submitted is basically the design, the permitting, through bidding. So at the end of that process, we would have a contractor on board and could move forward with construction. Now, at this point, I don't know that the funding mechanism is in place yet, so we also submitted just a brief write-up on some possible funding options. So, and
Okay. So I did send John DeVozo an email today too, because they're doing a water rate study as we speak for both Timberley and Grey Lakeville, the Grey Lakeville water. So I wanted to make sure that they include these costs in that Timberley rate study too. So. You know, we need, one of my goals for this year was to get Timberley done. So we just need to keep it moving forward. You know, Eagle's been after us for 15 years. We just need to get it done. So, you know, I think this is what we need to do.
I have a couple of questions on the booster tank and the booster pump up there. What changed? I mean, they were engineered to begin with, and your comment earlier, if I interpreted it right, was we only use 2% of the capacity. There, at that area where the booster station is, they didn't build it for 98% more capacity. So that thing was engineered. What happened?
so I'm going by the best information I have, which is a few record drawings. The tank was salvaged. My understanding, it was taken from somewhere else and used here. So I'm not sure that it was actually designed for that site. My comment is based on when I'm sitting out there with the DPW, I see the pumps run for 5 seconds. And if you just do that calculation of how much that pump goes, that tells you how much that tank refilled.
Nothing.
And it's
That's a tank that doesn't have a diaphragm in it. It's an old style tank.
correct, that's my
So
understanding.
is that tank waterlogged?
Well,
I mean,
They-
it's kind of an interesting thing, and when I look at this, I go, okay, certainly if you have volume use, your pumps are going to exercise or turn on and turn off much longer. If somebody's watering their lawn and everybody's in the homes using water, okay?
Right.
So if you're sampling this at a non-peak time, certainly it's going to kick on and kick off. But if the tank is waterlogged, full of water, and it doesn't have the air chamber capacity in it, it doesn't matter what you put in there. You could put in a house pump, and it's gonna cycle just as fast if there isn't use on the system. So, would you not think that we should have checked to see if that tank has, well, it's not gonna have a diaphragm, it's too old.
yeah.
But it's waterlogged, is what it is. It's just plain filled with water, because the water absorbs any air you put into it eventually, and it's waterlogged. So if you drained out half of it, filled it up with air, I think you would end up with, or filled it up with air and drained half of it out, you'll have a different scenario, a much different scenario. Because this thing was engineered. I mean, to say 2% of the use just kills me.
That's probably most of the electricity being used is when that pump turns on, because of the spike of it.
Oh, yeah.
And I know our wells at home, are they 40, 60? Usually it turns on at 40
Yeah,
and shuts off at
basically.
60.
Yeah.
But yeah, if it's on, that's when your lights dim, is when that thing turns on.
But this has got to be much higher pressure,
Oh,
and it's substantial pressure. And that was the other question I had was about, you have a pressure relief at the bottom. Where's the pressure? It's kind of an interesting thing. When you get up and you talk and you go through your scenario of replacing the tanks, you don't say, we're talking about replacing the tanks down at the well at the bottom of the system and/or where the wells are. there's certainly pressure tank in a different location, and we need to know those locations. So we can kind of follow. Do you see what I'm saying? There's another pump up by Cottonwood, right?
Correct,
And there's another tank up by Cottonwood.
correct.
So it's not all one location that this work is projected. And without a drawing or some type of schematics or articulating where we're talking, like, and I know the system, so it's gotta be pretty hard for some of the people here trying to keep up.
Isn't, Cottonwood is where it's cycling all the time, isn't it?
That's correct. It
That's
is,
the
a booster station
the
at a
booster.
separate site from, there's one large tank near the wells, exactly like you said. And then there's a booster station that pumps water up to the Cottonwood apartments.
Right.
And it is a different site, and at that site, there are booster pumps, 225, I mean, they're gallon per minute pumps. They're very big pumps. And there's a 1,000-gallon pressure tank at that site as well. So there's a separate little building
At the booster site.
at the booster site, correct. Yep,
And when we talked earlier, you were saying that according to Eagle requirements, that tank's way bigger than it needs to be. Is that
It-
correct?
yes.
Which-
Preliminary
For
look at that.
use,
Yes.
for use,
The one at the booster?
yeah.
Yes, for just looking at the number of users on that tank, it is pretty drastically oversized. Hydropneumatic tank would require, per Eagle requirements is about 60 gallons.
60 gallons.
That's based on the Eagle requirements. Now, like
Oh, for how many units?
24.
That doesn't seem right at all. Geez, I got a bigger tank than that in my house.
Well, Ken was saying that there is one other thing, and that's for flushing, you needed to verify how big the tank would need to be.
Correct,
But for actual use,
yes.
Eagle requirements is 60 gallons.
Your expansion would be nothing, your pumps would be running constantly.
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense.
You're better off to run a pump and store water than
Run it all the time.
than have it kick on and off. And
Unless you have a constant run pump, a new well, like the fire department's got over here, so you don't have the surges. I mean, you're talking about two different systems completely, but
Right.
Terry's exactly right. Your capacity, in most cases, years ago, you put in maybe 6 or 8, boo guys at their farm, artist boo guy and stuff, they had like 8 or 10 expansion tanks, pressure tanks, diaphragm tanks, because when they used water, their well wasn't going boom, 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 kicking on and kicking off, kicking on and kicking off. And that's what you're doing right now, and the reason you're doing it is because that tank's waterlogged. You might as well not even have a tank in a system, just kick it down the hill.
That's what it's doing.
You don't have anything in there.
Yeah, but if you were to repressurize it, is it gonna lose its pressure again?
No, well, in,
Did happen at my house.
in,
And we had a
in year,
tank for
in
a
years,
farm.
in years, it takes.
Yeah, but it just, when it loses the air pressure and it fills with water, it was just gonna do it over and over again, isn't it?
But it takes years to do that.
So, when I met up there with the DPW, I mean, that tank is connected to a compressor. So that's not saying it's not waterlogged, maybe. I guess the details haven't been hashed out to that extent, and we could go through that. We could dig into it more and figure out exactly what's needed, and that's fine. The idea here was that would be part of the design, and we could just get moving forward with everything at once. Sorting out the exact issues, whether or not it needs to be replaced, what sizes it would need to be replaced with. So we haven't gotten into all those details in that extent yet, but we can. I have no problem doing that.
But that would be part of this process,
Right.
with the design,
That
process.
doesn't make any sense. Because if you're already including it in the price here of replacement, that's like saying, okay, I'm gonna put a new roof on my house, but why don't you come over and see if you can patch it? And it just doesn't make any sense. I would have thought you would have done it as part of your engineering process, design process, just to find out what the fail-safe is. Because the first thing anybody would do as far as I'm concerned, would be to, if a pump kicks on and kicks off immediately, the first thing you would do is check to see if your even if you had a diaphragm tank, that diaphragm is ruptured. And then the second thing you would do, if you have a tank like we have, which is non-diaphragmed, would be to check to see if it was waterlogged. That would be the easiest thing in the world to do. And then that would have saved, I mean, a lot of paperwork.
Would it be
Does
beneficial
it-
to call crop in and have him evaluate the thing?
I mean,
You know, it's
anybody
water.
could evaluate it at that point. And it doesn't make any difference how big your tank, your pump is at that point.
No,
It has to
it's
do
gonna
with
go
how big your tank is to buffer that surge.
Yeah.
So you can have a 40-60 or a 60-80 or whatever you decide or is for that system. Is that tank bad, actually bad? Apparently not.
The outside appearance does not seem bad at all.
And the pump is apparently good.
Pump seems to work just fine.
So what is the estimate for just the pump and the tank?
The cost?
Yeah. And the piping and everything else?
So based on my preliminary numbers that I sent, which I don't know that I have with me.
That's gotta be huge.
The replacement tank. So part of this process could be done by DPW digging into this tank and figuring those items out in more detail.
Oh, it has to be DPW to do it?
They're the operator of the system. So we can certainly work with them, but I'm not gonna be in there operating and
Isn't-
draining the tank and doing it.
That's-
Or a consultant, or, a
Okay.
contractor.
Okay.
So we could certainly get into that.
You don't have your notes on the cost?
I'm looking at it right now. Oh, so while I was waiting for set points, I don't even have the set points for those tanks yet. I'm still waiting from that data from the
Are we
DPW
talking about at the
at the Cottonwood Booster Station.
booster station? Okay.
Correct.
Just so I know.
So in the process of waiting for that, I got a quote for a new 1,000-gallon tank.
Okay.
And that's $40,000+ just for that tank. So that's an instant savings if that tank is fine. That's an instant savings right there.
40 grand.
Yeah, yep. But if
That's the
you're,
one down below where the wells are.
No,
That's
the one on
that's
the-
the one at the,
This
that's
is
the one I
Cottonwood.
wanna make sure.
this is
That's the
Cottonwood.
booster,
We're just talking about Cottonwood at
but
this
you were
point.
talking about the pump as well.
At Cottonwood,
Yeah.
correct.
Cottonwood, 40,000 for a 1,000
For
gallon.
a tank. But it-
Cottonwood, yes.
And-
Down below.
And again, and maybe I presented this incorrectly. When we're looking at this, I'm trying to give you guys a picture so you can understand the potential impact of this. If there's funding that needs to be requested, maybe I'm being conservative. And we can dig into this deeper and get a more clear number if that's the route you want to go. But, if you're requesting funding or you got to figure out funding for this, at some point, we either go through the design and figure out exactly what you need, or you get to start the process based on estimates.
I guess for me, it would be, it's one thing to throw out a cost. It's another thing to find out if we need to replace everything, or we just need to replace, the tank down at the wells. Because certainly, I don't know, it just doesn't make any sense to me to throw out figures that are, and even funding. I mean, how in the heck do we know what we're gonna do? Well, I'm sure that we're gonna have to go out for funding, that would be my idea, because certainly Cottonwood should be a standalone. We shouldn't use any other funds for them. They should stand alone. But anyways, we shouldn't even be talking about the booster tank and booster pumps if in fact they are just waterlogged. We should be only talking about what we need to do to maintain the system in a reasonable fashion. But maybe the rest of the board would like to just go ahead and do it. I mean, I'm only one of seven, so.
Well, when I heard that the pump was going on and off all the time, you're right, it's waterlogged.
Yeah.
It sounds like it's waterlogged, and
Sure.
I didn't know if they,
So how soon could we jump on that and go check and see, is it waterlogged or not?
I can place the call tomorrow to DPW.
There you go.
Okay.
I can't guarantee how soon they'll get out there.
Sure.
Those guys have been swamped and hard to get a hold of.
I'll shoot John an email as well, if that's what you guys
And
want
then,
to do.
and then get back to us, we gotta
Yeah.
call a special meeting or something, let's just, you know.
It isn't gonna make any difference if you go to a smaller tank, smaller pump, if in fact, if you have a tank eventually that gets waterlogged.
Oh, yeah.
It's just gonna do the same thing.
That's what they're gonna find out.
So is that what we want them to do? Do we want them to find out if there's, if that tank can be utilized, if we repressurize it, that kind of thing? Is that,
Well, you'd say that could last years, but, you know, we wanna do something that's gonna last 30 years. Whatever we do.
It's going to last as long as, it's, the whole system up there is going to last until you have either a complete failure, or Eagle comes in, or somebody else comes in and says you gotta update something, or you gotta change something. We've been going at this since I've been on the board. I think this is probably a dozen upgrades that we've done to the Timberlea water in one shape or form. And the other thing is you don't, this pump could have been recycling or cycling, short cycling for 10 years. Nobody's ever gone up there and looked, apparently. Yeah, I mean, this could have been gone for an indefinite amount of time. Who knows? And that's part of the problem, is nobody's going up there to check it, to make sure the system is functioning. Somebody just apparently walked into the pump kicked on and kicked off. But, you know, the DPW should have been maintaining that system, but they're sending people out there that probably don't even have a clue about a non-diaphragm tank, you know, because they're younger people.
So who noticed it to start with? That it
Pardon?
was, who noticed that the booster pump was cycling on and off?
I don't know when it started. It's been on comments for years.
Well,
On
see,
that,
there
but
you
who,
go.
The-
Years ago.
Yeah,
was
I
it
think,
through the DPW?
I think it was DPW.
Well, now, if they would have
That's my
noticed that,
understanding.
wouldn't they have thought of that?
Not a
I mean, these guys, John DeVozo ran how many systems in Cadillac, and, you know, I just can't believe they would completely miss
It's
that.
like going to an attorney. Attorneys know better than the people that their client. You gotta tell them, you gotta talk to them, you gotta know what's going on. I'm willing to say right now, I bet if they go down and they drain that tank down and they pressurize it, that pump in that tank is going to function again for the next 20 years.
Well, I have no problem working with the DPW, try to get that done. I mean, then it takes the question away.
Okay,
and that is part of the system.
on that part.
You
Yeah.
still have the
Right,
big tank down at the
Right.
wellhead.
Yeah.
Yes, and that is not correctly pressure rated.
And
And that's
Right.
that's an Eagle
That's
issue,
gotta be done.
without
Yeah,
question.
that's the one that we're,
So,
Yeah, yeah.
Where is the pressure regulator in the system? You talk about a pressure regulator in the system, but although we're running over 100 pounds, or approximately 100 pounds down at the wellheads, where is the regulator that is controlling, that you're talking about in your estimate to replace?
The pressure regulator?
Yeah, you talk about a pressure regulator.
I mean, all the houses have PRVs, right? All the houses,
No.
No, not all of them. I wouldn't, well, I don't know for certain. Some of them I would assume do or should.
On city water, you generally do. On well, it's
Um,
just your switch.
There is so much elevation difference throughout the system that there are some places that are up high and don't have very high pressure at all.
okay.
when we
Ones
had that,
down low should definitely have pressure regulators
yeah,
on.
when we had that meeting, the DPW said they put pressure regulators in some of them at the lower part.
At the houses,
Yeah.
at the water going in, but he talks about a pressure regulator.
They turn the pump on and off.
No, I read it in here, but I don't know exactly. No. Anyways,
So if we
So
had
if you
that,
go in and review this booster station, how does that affect this current contract we're looking at for the design and engineering in the amount of 41,000? Would that change that?
You know, it could. It would take some
Okay.
cost off. We don't need to do anything with that booster station. That takes a chunk off of that.
It would have to be huge change.
Okay.
Yeah. So it would reduce the
I
cost.
mean, I want to move Timberley forward, same
Yeah.
as you do, Jeff. I just
we gotta
don't
get it
want
done.
us. Ultimately, it's the users are paying for this. And if we make a
Sure.
mistake,
Sure. Yep,
we're paying for it.
yeah, for sure.
So how do we get this moving then?
So, do we want to have Ken make that call? I'll send John
I
DeVozo an
would say
email,
both of
have
them.
them look at it and
And ask,
see,
at least pose the question.
see if the DPW can determine that that tank is actually functioning, if we get it repressurized the way it should, and maybe that pump. Now, if it continues to be an issue, then I guess we need to revisit that. So-
But I just can't believe that
Okay,
that system was engineered before, and then now all of a sudden it's,
so does that mean we want to
98%.
put this on hold then until they come back with that information for us?
yes,
Am I hearing that correctly?
yes.
Is everybody,
Well, hopefully if they
Thinking that.
come back and they can redo it, we get a revised
right, right,
pricing.
Yes.
Because
right,
there's a
Yes.
lot of costs here
Right.
included that we won't need.
okay. Now, we will be paying our engineers by the hour to do this stuff, I mean.
To
so-
do what?
well,
DPW's
well,
doing it.
Well, I know, but I mean, any involvement they have, we end up, we do pay, so. I'm just saying,
Well, if this is 41,000 bucks, it
Right,
should
no, I
go
agree.
less than half.
I
I'm in
understand,
my estimation.
okay.
Consensus then, yes.
Consensus on that? So Ken, if you could do that, and I'll send John an email, and we'll follow up with DPW, and hopefully they can get to it within the next.
Gee, I'll
However
walk
long.
up there and drain it down, that takes nothing.
I got wrenches.
Okay.
I mean, it takes nothing to do it.
Stick a pin in it. All right, so are we ready to move on to 10C? Phase 3. Anything you want to say about it before we start, Ken?
You know, I tried to outline it in the memo.
Okay. So obviously, some things changed since 2019 when we signed the original contract, September 4th, 2019, and our engineering firm is asking for some more money to cover those costs. I think I covered it in a real basic way.
Is this gonna be for the final drawings, everything?
Yes,
They
that's
have
final
all of the
design for phase
information
3.
Right now to,
Yeah, and there's one thing I do want to point out, is this would be completion of the project as a whole. So funding-wise, it's broken out A, B, and C. Project-wise, this would complete it as one entire project for one bid as a whole project.
with all the add-ons that we talked about.
Yes, yep.
And then the change in water drainage or lack
Yeah.
of at the water's edge.
Yes, so that would be the underground storage,
Yeah,
which we actually did get preliminary approval from the drain commissioner if we want to move forward with that.
okay.
This isn't project oversight as there being construction oversight though, is it?
No,
This
it is
stri-
not.
This is strictly the engineering for those
Correct.
three.
Correct.
Design and, okay.
Yep.
Guys have questions for Ken on it?
Who was the mechanical sub-consultant that retired?
Larry Monagold of Bay Shore Engineering.
Who do you have now as a, sub-
Neelis Engineering would be replacing them.
who is it?
Neelis Engineering, they're out of Traverse City.
So he's asking for, what, 40,000
Do.
additional?
40,820.
820?
I did speak to our attorney today about this, just to, so I was clear on it. He said bullet points 2, 3, and 4, for sure the township would be responsible for. There could be an argument that bullet point 1, he said he could make the argument that we shouldn't be responsible for, although he had no guarantee that that would fly in court. So I think those were pretty close to his words, weren't they, Connie? So,
Rock in a hard spot.
so, yeah,
All right.
so that's where we're at.
So did the AE Mechanical have anything done? Like, is that something that belongs to us now?
Yeah.
Come on up, Ray.
Yeah.
Come on up, Ray.
I mean, work was done, but this other firm is not just gonna take some of these drawings and put a seal on it. That's, from a liability standpoint, they can't do that. So they have to review the engineering and make sure it's all up to standard, because they're not now gonna take responsibility. It's as simple as that. I wouldn't take somebody else's drawings and just sell my seal or put my seal on it. That'd be, you just don't do that professionally. So that's fundamentally what it is, so.
Right.
And I mean, like Jeff said, we've had a pandemic and we've had a lot of crazy stuff going on since the last 2 years. And the project continually keeps getting pushed back and stuff too. And by doing things piecemeal doesn't help anybody either. If we were able to have just in one foul swoop completed everything as originally planned, we wouldn't be even having this conversation today because it would all be done. So it's no fault of anybody involved. It's just that the funding and everything else keeps going. And if we bid this, kind of like we've talked about, we can only hold bids open for like 90 days at the max, because construction prices are fluctuating so much that there's no contractor that will guarantee a price. So if we took this out for bids, at any point, we can only hold the bids for 90 days, just so everybody's aware of that. So it's like, you know, I think there was the idea of bidding it out, seeing where the numbers were, try to figure out the funding, all that kind of stuff. But just so everybody knows, if we do that kind of thing, those numbers are only worth, 90 days worth of time. Because, I mean, in the last year, it's been madness how much we've seen, price increases happening. So what we're seeing contractors doing is they have to order as much as they can immediately to be able to lock their prices in when they do a bid project. So just, things are changing how everybody operates right now. And then we also have to look at different construction types, because if steel's crazy price, then we have to switch to wood. Whereas, that this is all just kind of new of how we have to do business today and be agile with what we're doing to make it the best value for the township, so.
I'll make a motion that we accept the bid for $40,820 for Phase 3 project completion. And that would be the design?
Yes,
The design and engineering, right?
correct.
Okay.
And submittal of permits.
And, okay, yeah, exactly, everything that's on this proposal dated August 31, 2022.
I'll support.
We have a motion by Dave, support by Deb. Any other discussion or questions? All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, you guys.
That was a hard one, David, good job.
Got no choice.
Brewery Creek parking lot. Moving on to the next one. Thank you, Ray.
Yeah, thanks, Ray. All right, Brewery Creek,
Sell the property.
all right, so we got the geotech report back from Brewery Creek. The reason we wanted the geotech report, that thing's been Swiss cheese with soil borings over the years. But there hasn't been anything since they put the parking lot in. And we didn't have any records of what was done when they put the parking lot in. So what we did is we just wanted to see, how much work did they do when they put the parking lot in? Did they do some fill? How much more work are we gonna have to do in there? And what we found is they pretty much put the minimum section in almost every site we looked. There were a couple places that looked like it had some sand backfill, but a lot of it was a pretty minimal section. So we took the pavement section recommendation from the geotech firm. That said, this is the section you're gonna use. If you want this to last 20-plus years, this is our recommended section. And we plugged the numbers into that, and it was astronomically high. It more than doubled the cost of the project, to the tune of over $2 million. So at that point, we're just like, well, let's regroup, let's reassess, what do we wanna do at this point? Just looking through it, you know, we kind of threw out a few options, different ways to look at it. I mean, there's a do-nothing option, use it as it is. There is, try to fix it up a little bit with what's there, maybe take out some parking islands, make it a little easier to maneuver boats and trailers through. I mean, that's an option. You could grade the site out, make it a gravel parking lot. Gravel's pretty easy to fix, a lot less cost than asphalt, but you don't park as many boats on gravel, and you're dealing with gravel and dust and such. Or we move forward with a pavement section, a standard one, knowing that it's probably gonna fail before its design life is through. And all these options cost, you know, they all have a cost attached with them. And even just doing the grading and gravel is still looking at like $1 million project, just based on the amount of site work and the size of the parking lot. It's a large parking lot. Reconstructing drainage basins and such. So basically, we just wanted to bring this to everybody's attention before we went any further.
So it only has one coat of asphalt on it. They never did the second coat. So that's, you know, it's pretty much fallen apart. You know, directly behind to the west of the subway parking lot, I mean, and we have a picture in here. There's a driveway that goes back to a parking lot behind that. And that's just a curb, and that was supposed to be approved for a drive-through bank right there. So that's actually was a lot that was for sale. So where everybody see that where I'm talking about, where that driveway goes back to that parking lot? So you could open that up for more parking. Actually, you could park cars in there easily enough. I guess what I'm wondering is if we can just fix it up, use some signs and some striping and that kind of stuff, and utilize it close to the way it is. I hate to spend all that money on it. I mean,
Jeff, what's our income based on that? What do we make a year?
on the parking lot?
Just the parking alone, yes.
Well, you know, we don't know for sure.
$15.
It's
Elmwood
Or
Township.
$10 a boat.
The marina.
No, just
the
on
parking lot, on the Brewery
Creek
Creek parking lot.
They don't need nothing.
Thank you.
Well,
Is it
That's
10?
a simple answer.
they're charging.
Well,
They're charging for people to go over there and park.
They don't pay for the
But-
guy's
But not a lot.
time.
Not a lot.
No, I mean, we would never make up $2 million.
Jeff, your motion sounded great to me.
Well, the bad part is we have a piece of property that if you don't, you have a piece of property that if you don't improve, the prices aren't gonna get any cheaper. And what do you do with the property?
You don't put $2 million in it, it's
No,
gonna
no,
fail.
no, no, it's, hey, we bought it, and if you thought we were gonna get anything more than what we got, you were mistaken. It is a piece of property that's been filled with muck and wetlands.
And a bulldozer.
And,
Bulldozer behind there.
yeah,
Yep.
there's no doubt. And, the bad part is with all of the curbs and islands, it's not practical to use even for boat trailers now, or boats, or reasonable parking other than automobile parking. I mean, I see boats and trailers, but they're in the back on the grass 90% of the time, or there's one boat or two boats and one big parking lot on the asphalt, simply because it's so difficult to get in and out of it.
So
It's
if we had
horrible.
it done perfect, would we have more cars down there?
Absolutely. If the marina does their job,
Pete's
is the
gonna
way I
join
see it, and makes the people, or has the people come across. The same with the park. The park needs overflow parking as well. I mean, it's a mess
For sure.
down there. The one thing we lack, any community lacks, is parking.
Well, and remember, in 2025, MDOT is redoing that corridor, and where you see that parking, that sidewalk come out to M22, there will be a crosswalk there.
Yeah.
And ultimately, signalized crosswalk. So that connects that parking lot to, like you said, the park across the street, Dave, and the marina. So,
That will be good.
so
Well,
there will be potentially more cars parking over there at that point.
and the bad part is do you, okay, MDOT's gonna improve the parking and the crosswalks. Do we then wait to somehow improve the parking after the fact? When already we should be proactive instead of reactive.
You know that right now, I think we should wait, because I mean, with inflation, we don't know where it's going. It's a troubled time right now. It's really troubling. I just think we should wait until 2025 and just get by.
So, help me to understand too, where does this property, how close is that to the Discovery property? And is there any potential that there might be interest in terms of when they're looking at their expansion and the university center there? I mean, I'm just trying to think if, you know, it
So you see
may
this,
not make any sense to,
see this little two-track that
Yep.
goes across Richard Bones' property? And then the next property to the south of him is Mancino's, and then you got Discovery.
Well, Discovery's north parking lot,
Right.
which has got wetlands on both sides or a
Well,
creek.
they got the old video store, is what I'm talking about.
Right.
Yeah,
little
yeah,
family.
but you'd still have to
Right.
keep those hops
Right.
going.
right, but we don't know what they're looking at doing, what, a
$80 million
$80
building.
million
Yeah.
project there?
Sure,
In 2080.
yeah.
Well, then we
Yeah.
don't have to worry. All right, I just
It's
wanted to
gonna
kind of
be
keep that in
ways out.
mind, that there are some
Yeah.
other things in
I'll
the.
be 78.
They're gonna have the same problem we do
Yeah, they will.
with engineering.
Oh, for sure.
Absolutely.
How many boats does Pete put over there potentially now on a busy weekend?
On all the weekends through the summer, from Memorial through Labor Day, and this past weekend, probably next Saturday, we're full on the water side, and we will, last weekend, we nearly filled Brewery Creek. It's, and then another point of Elmwood's, our marina there is the launch. So if you're staying at one of the other marinas locally, they can't launch you. So they launch at Elmwood and pay us to park. We charge $10 a night in Brewery Creek, and I think we have that, Chris, and itemized, but I think it's all in parking. But the state, I just had them separate so we could know how much revenue was coming in to Brewery Creek, how much was coming on the water side. So we send people across the road because if they're gonna stay at another marina, they don't get no priority, but they're not getting our best parking, because we want our day launchers to use the water side, so they can get their trailer, grab the boat, and get out of there. We had 6 and 9 boats at a time, Saturday all day long. So, one of the things I think about is, the current setup, you know, obviously, when we bought it way back when, the intent was to use it for overflow parking, and we can still use it as is. The thought of pulling curbing and things like that out, you could do that, fill in some low areas, the grassy areas, we could put the roadbed type gravel in, which is a little harder, you know, packs. The types of vehicles that are going over there, some are too big to park on even our water side, and we have 60 and 50-foot parking spaces. So the challenge is getting them in, getting them uniform enough that you can maximize the potential. And then the other thing I think about is the township, you know, and as the marina, kind of what are we doing in the neighborhood, so to speak? Are we doing good and best to the neighbors, the folks that own property, and they're currently what was expected to come? And we're gonna, and then ultimately, my thoughts are, these are crazy high prices. I agree with Jim that the cost is, we're never gonna regroup that. And as a public marina, without input, say, from the state, a healthy, maybe a grant, or if there's, you know, any other form of revenue to come in and help, since we are loading up the bay with boats from our point, and we're footing all the bill, it doesn't, you know, I would say that it's, my personal opinion is it's cost prohibitive right now, but, you know.
The other thing that we need to keep in mind is, what is phase 3 now? A couple $1 million for phase 3 of that marina improvement?
Marina.
What's currently grants in place, I think is it 3 million?
3 million?
Plus there's another
Right.
$1.5 million phase. We're still have to apply for grants. So it's almost a $5 million project. if I
Total.
remember correctly.
Total, but I'm talking phase 3, so we still have a couple million to spend on phase 3, plus ADOC.
ADOC
as
is
soon as
aged
we're-
out,
Yeah,
right.
and that was $1 million a couple of years ago, probably $1.5 million now.
At
So
least,
we
yeah.
have some big expenses coming up.
Yeah, ADOC, and
addition
then
to
I've
that.
gotta do some wall repairs and.
Right,
and,
so
launch
that's
docks
my
are gonna be-
concern.
Yep,
So,
I agree, we don't have the money. The
Right.
bad part is we have a
Right.
piece of property that's not being utilized, and it's not gonna get cheaper. So I don't care if you wait 10 years, this price is gonna be a bargain in 10 years.
seems that way.
yeah,
But we don't have the money.
Right.
We're spending that on everything else.
so, and when Brian called, because he didn't want Ken to have to tell me how much it was. So, when he told me 2.5 million, I said, let us know what it would take to fix up what's there. And I guess personally, I would think maybe look at pulling some of those curbs out just to maximize the parking and give us an idea of, like I said, with some striping down there and some signs, at least it would make it better, people parking where they should park, and maximize it as well as we could. I mean, that back grassy area where they put all those big rigs, you could put gravel in there, some of the road gravel, like you said, Pete, and we've got those cement parking things.
Stops, yeah.
Stops. You could put them in a line back there so people
Yep.
understood that's where they were supposed to park on the gravel.
We can.
Um,
It'd be a temporary
I mean,
thing, and then you
I
guys
don't-
get to decide whether you wanna jump in, like Dave said, now will look cheap 10 years from now, so
Yeah, well,
how do you wanna look at it? And then, again, the look, I mean, if that's all we can do and afford, then that's what we do, type of thing, but.
part of, for me, the bad part is Brewery Creek's an eyesore.
Mhm.
It's been this eyesore for 15 years or more. And the only thing that happened is it jumped from private, and we couldn't do anything about it. Now it's public, or we own it. It's sad to have that piece of property sitting there and not being utilized.
For sure.
And it's
It's being utilized, just not as much as
Well,
it could
it's
be.
kind of being utilized. Well, it's not gonna be much longer. All the asphalt's gonna have to be replaced even on the main roads coming in. So it's one of those things, do you do repairs, re-asphalt everything going in and going back out to Carter Road? Because that thing's really breaking up.
Grandview.
You know that more than I do.
Yeah, Grandview.
Yeah.
And then the amount of, if we did put road bed down and, then you're gonna have dust issues. You could brine it, but different things that you gotta consider if we don't,
Right.
go ahead. Cause I can tell you this, that we will fill it all summer, every summer from now on. We launched more boats, for the air show this year than ever. And we filled it and they were full up the road and everything, and it worked. I don't even know where some people parked, but, if we didn't have that, we'd
Right.
be in serious problems. We'd have serious
Yeah,
problems.
and $10 a night, that doesn't cut it.
Connie?
Well, I just wanted to say, I think we just have to look at prioritizing what needs to be done around there. We have to finish phase 3.
Yep.
We've gotta do that. And we've gotta look at the dock replacement. So I think the parking is number 3, the way I see it. Even if it does go up, anything else is gonna go up.
Support.
So do we want our engineers to look at if they can fix it up a little bit and make it more usable? Is that what we wanna do? Cause right now, like you guys said, I mean, it's so hard to get in and out of some of those parking areas. Like I was referencing that driveway going back in there. to make that turn and get into that parking lot, you know, you end up on a weekend having 3 vehicles parked in there with trailers, and they're blocking everybody else.
Right.
So if there was a way to open that up a little bit and maybe have some lines and some direction for people, then we could control a little bit. Because, I mean, before the township owned it, when it was owned by those venture capitalists from Texas, my kids and I were out there parking people during the air show to prevent fights, because there were fights back there. And we parked 150 boats and trailers back there.
You made more
Wow.
money than, you
Darn
made
right
more
we
money
did.
than the
I
township
called those
is.
venture capitalists and I said, my kids need a college fund. They said, we don't
Exactly.
care, do it.
Exactly.
So they were back there parking it, and they were cute, and nobody argued, but, so it can be done back there if there's some, if the people have some understanding of where they need to be, and somebody's, I mean, we can't have an employee over there all the time parking them like we
Actually,
were out
that's a
there.
good idea.
But,
That's a good idea, to have them give us an idea of cost to pull out some of the curbing and stuff like that, and then backfill those areas, kind of organize it a little
Yeah.
more than it is, because it's certainly right now is a mess.
yeah,
So can you get with the engineer and kind of suggest what we want then?
sure, I'll walk around, we'll meet out there, Pete can come over.
Can I also recommend that,
We'll walk
just in those parts where it's paved, to get those repaired, maybe section, patched, some of it so
Why don't we walk
broken
around?
up. that I
Why don't
would
we walk
recommend
around
that
with
we
our
do.
engineers in there and just see if we
Yeah.
can figure out a way to open it up some and make it
Yeah.
more usable.
Because if the curbs were out,
Yeah,
that, it would make a big difference,
Yeah.
as far as at least being able to transition.
right,
Yeah, yeah.
okay.
Consensus again on that?
Sounds like another consensus situation? Is that what we're doing? Okay,
A couple million short, but yeah.
yeah. Is that all for you, Ken? Just that?
I think that was it.
Boy, how'd you like your beating, Ken?
Thanks, Ken. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you, guys.
There's
Thank you.
water in the fridge if you need some.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
You Get it, Connie.
Item 10E, deficit reduction resolution. Connie?
Okay. Well, in our audit, if you looked at it, the special assessment had the deficit of $19,047. So, since the township does not have its own printing press to make and print money, we have to submit a plan to the state. So, the special assessments were all, under the audit, they're all lumped under one. So those Timberley Road Construction Bond and the Grelville Water Main Bond were all in one. So from the deficit of $19,047, we'll have special assessment payments coming in. Those get billed out, what'd you say, Chris, next month?
Yeah.
So there's at least $8,798 coming in. The general fund, the operating transfer would be $75,094. The expenses, which we already paid back in March, were $64,845, and that'll bring our balance to zero, to even. That is enough. That should be enough to satisfy the state. There's a gentleman from Treasury that looked this over for me and said that that would satisfy the need, satisfy the requirements for that. So we would just have to pass this resolution, and I submit it to the state, and then we're good. But then next year is where we'll have another bond due, the water main bond, another payment. It'll be due in March of '23. So that's, let me back up. So we have options. If we paid that bond off, like I said in the memo, this fall, we'd save about $7,700 over just following the cash flow, the two payments that are actually left in March of '23 and '24. So that's what the board needs to decide. Do we want to pay that off now and transfer all of it now between the if we can borrow from the operating, well, actually just use the Grelville operating fund and general fund money, or we wait until March of '23, possibly pay it off then. And I think we'd have a really good idea of how much we could use from the operating fund at that point.
What does Chris think about that?
I think that we should pay it off now, and then we have the money to be able to cover the funds for the 2 special assessments.
Where would the money come from, out of the
General fund.
general fund?
Yeah, which we still have even less the ARPA funds. Got my packet turned around here from Chris's treasurer's report. We still have like 1.2 million in cash without the ARPA money. So, I mean, those are options. Just what's the board's preference?
So do you agree with Chris that we should pay it off?
That's the way I was kind of thinking. But as I look at it more, I'm thinking maybe wait until next March and and make a final payment in March of '23. We'd still save a little bit, just so we have a better idea of where that Grelville operating is in another few months. I've talked to John DeVoza somewhat. If we wanted to basically make an operating transfer, if we had the general fund, pay everything off, and then just take money from the operating fund yearly, depending on how many years we wanted to go. If we wanted to do 10 years, it would add like $21 a month to the users' bills. But they would need to build that into the rate study they're doing right now.
So they would be paying it back, basically.
Yeah, they would be paying back the general fund. It would still be counted as an asset, the general fund, just like that septic treatment plant.
Sure.
They still owe
I think that's a good idea.
a couple $100,000, I think, from the septic treatment. So that's actually, when you see the fund balance in that resolution that I noted for the state, that are unrestricted fund balance of $1,817,000, that includes that septic fund that they're paying us back.
I think the users should pay for ultimately the benefit, so
Yeah.
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, I do too.
So to say, I mean, that's $7,700, quite a bit
Yeah.
of money, really.
Mhm.
And if you have the funds to pay it off, that's better than getting an interest, that's for sure.
Yeah, and then the general fund can charge interest.
Absolutely.
It's actually probably a better investment than sitting in the bank.
Good point.
That's what I'm saying, it's much better.
Yeah.
Sounds like a plan to me.
Okay.
So,
Anybody want to do a motion for that?
let me think about this. Well, first, let's do this Resolution 11 of 2022. I move that we adopt Resolution 11 of 2022, a deficit elimination plan to be submitted to the state.
Support.
Okay, we have a motion and support. Any other discussion about the deficit elimination plan? Roll call vote, please, Connie.
I'll vote yes. Dave Darda?
Yes.
Jim O'Rourke?
Yes.
Chris Makowski? Yes. Terry Lautner?
Yes.
Deb Allen?
Yes.
Jeff Shaw?
Yes, motion passes. Thank you. All right. Connie, do you want to capture what we talked about in the motion?
Yeah, I'll do that. I'll make a motion to have myself go ahead and start and work with US Bank to start the paperwork to make a final bond payment as soon as we can. We probably by October 15th.
Okay.
So I'll put a little detail to make the final bond payment on the Grelikville water special assessment bonds.
Support.
Okay, we have a motion of support. Any other questions or discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you. Item 11, Dave, payment of invoices.
Oh, my gosh. I make a motion to pay the invoice in the amount of $88,963.89.
I'll second.
We have a motion, but nobody wanted to support it. Connie,
I didn't
support.
want to support it.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Extended public comment. Sarah Claren, anything? Eric, anything? All right, you guys, it is exactly 7:06, and this meeting is adjourned.
Good teamwork.
Thank you.
guys.